As Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans continue to shamelessly spread dangerous disinformation about the federal government's response to Hurricanes Helene and Milton, liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov was on hand to provide crucial fact checks to her MAGA co-host's lies, which in turn predictably triggered them. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, as you know, we are the unofficial fan club of Jessica Tarlov, the only sane voice at the Fox Propaganda Network who has had to, over the span of the last 2 weeks or so, relentlessly fact-check the lies of her four MAGA co-hosts about the Biden-Harris administration's response to Hurricane Helene and now Hurricane Milton as well. So we're going to play some of these clips and unpack them together.
And they're playing catch-up now.
Well, let's be clear. The government was the one that got the first 40 Starlink satellites to get to North Carolina when Helene struck. That was the U.S. government. Donald Trump is very close with Elon Musk. He is arguably his most important backer with the $45 million a month that he does and using Twitter as a campaign bugle horn at this point. But the government was on top of that. Now, to say that what Joe Biden was doing was nakedly political removes the context of this, which is that the president of the United States of America is worried that people are listening to folks like Donald Trump, like Lara Trump. She was the one who said the 750. She was on with Dana Bash, trying to have, I guess, a nice conversation or get some hits in. Put up that lie. You know, they're only getting $750. And Dana Bash had to say that's absolutely untrue. That is a lie, because that makes people think.
That's what they're getting.
No, that
right now, that's what they're getting. I was in a flood. I know how it works.
I'm very sorry that happened to you. But Trump and co. should not be saying that's all that you're going to get, because it makes people feel like they have no options. And if it's just going to be $750, then what's the point? The point is that will get you what you need for your immediate necessities, things like baby formula. They were making fun of, I think it was Senator Kennedy, saying they're concerned about tampons. It's all about tampons with them. Well, sometimes you need feminine care items. That's what that was about. The Marjorie Taylor Greene thing with they controlled the weather. First, I thought she was talking about Jews again. I know we're powerful, not that powerful. Then it turns out it's the federal government. And Congressman Chuck Edwards from North Carolina had to release a huge statement about the disinformation of this because, again, his constituents are believing these crackpot Republicans who are being nakedly partisan about this. Secretary Buttigieg had to call up Elon Musk and say, hey, buddy, maybe you could stop tweeting about these things because you're spreading lies. And guess what? The mark of a true narcissist, someone so easily swayed, Elon Musk immediately backtracked because he was so happy because Secretary Pete gave him a call.
The only person who took Marjorie Taylor Greene seriously was Joe Biden.
No, then why did
nobody else did?
Why did Chuck Edwards issue that statement?
I don't know.
Who's Chuck Edwards?
He's the congressman. He's a Republican congressman who has thousands of constituents that are going to be out of their homes.
So here's my problem. There's so much to unpack there. Again, she's just on fire, per usual, with respect to providing the fact check. So number one, Donald Trump was trying to take credit, as he always does, even though he has no power whatsoever, at least in terms of federal authority, for the Starlink satellites. That was actually the federal government was responsible for that. The federal government deserves the credit, even though Trump is trying to take credit for it because of his close association with Elon Musk. Number one. Number two, speaking of Elon Musk, yes, Musk was spreading disinformation, was called out for it by Secretary Buttigieg of the Transportation Department. They had a private conversation, and then Elon Musk publicly thanked Buttigieg for reaching out to him and told even his MAGA followers that Buttigieg is on the ball. Number two. Number three, the response that Jeanine Pirro, Greg Gutfeld, Jesse Waters, and even Dana Perino, if you can hear at the end, jumping in to sweep Marjorie Taylor Greene's statements under the rug. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a sitting Republican congresswoman. She's not some lunatic on Twitter. She's not even some MAGA influencer like Laura Loomer, who wields enormous influence over Donald Trump. She not only wields enormous influence over Donald Trump, she is a sitting member of the Republican Party. She is emblematic and representative of the Republican Party and its future. She's one of their top fundraisers. She's close with Donald Trump. She was quite close with former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. And I want you to imagine a counterfactual. Imagine that the Democratic Party had someone as crazy and unhinged in their ranks, a senator or congressperson, somebody as unhinged as Marjorie Taylor Greene. How would Greg Gutfeld, Jeanine Pirro, Dana Perino, and Jesse Waters react in that timeline if Jessica Tarlov just laughed off this hypothetical Democratic version of Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh, she's a crackpot. No one takes them seriously. Do you think they would accept that? No, they would say it doesn't matter if you believe that. Number one, it's not true. Number two, even if it were true, that is a member of your party, someone who is an official member of your party who wields power on behalf of your party and therefore should be scrutinized. But because it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, they tried to sweep all of her unhinged conspiracy theories and derangement under the rug. Sorry, that's not going to cut it. This is further proof that the Republican Party, in terms of its politicians, they are inferior. They are terrible people. Their extremes are much more dangerous and much more representative of the party by far than is the case in the Democratic Party. You know what happens in the Democratic Party when someone is considered extreme? They lose their primaries. They lose the general election. They are punished. They are censured. They are called out. They lose elections. You know what happens with the extremes in the Republican Party? They're elevated. There is an asymmetry here. The Republican Party is objectively consistently worse, and anyone who tells you otherwise and tries to downplay Marjorie Taylor Greene, but obsesses over anything that any person aligned with the so-called left on Twitter says, they're hypocrites and losers, and you should make fun of them. So now we have another clip of Jessica Tarlov fact-checking her MAGA co-hosts about the federal government's response to Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton.
So I don't think that calling out inaccurate information that puts American citizens in harm's way.
How does it put them in harm's way?
Because if you are told the government is not coming to help you, you might become despondent. You might just sit at home, not try to get
a. I know
you
what it's like.
mentioned in the A block that you were in the flood too.
I understand. If they say the government isn't going to give me money, I'm going to go find someone who's going to give me money. But you're not going to kill yourself.
You don't know what's going on in these people's lives. If you hear that you're only going to get $750,
if they don't have a television, how do they even hear it?
And by the way, he did say when he was with Laura Ingraham the $750 thing, and she corrected him about it. So it's Lara Trump. It's Donald Trump saying we gave your disaster relief money to people who are here undocumented is a lie, and it B, obviously creates a narrative that is inaccurate and dangerous.
What pot are the immigrants getting the money from?
The shelter services pot.
Oh, a different FEMA pot. But it's a FEMA pot.
Yes, but
yes or no?
What you are accusing Joe Biden of is actually the thing that Donald Trump did in 2019. Ooh. That's what happened. He was the one who moved money out of the disaster relief fund.
Don't you see what's happening here? Don't you see what's happening?
I changed my vote, by the way.
So again, you see what happens. Jeanine Pirro gets triggered because she's losing the debate, as she always does, because Tarlov is smarter than her and better prepared and a better debater. And then Jesse Waters has to run in to make light of it to cover for Jeanine Pirro as she's being outmatched on live TV. So again, this is really important. Jeanine Pirro was saying, well, you know, the lies and disinformation doesn't matter because it's not really putting anybody's lives in jeopardy. So what if we either tell lies or signal boost lies? It's not like anybody's going to get hurt by them, right? Well, you have state and local Republican leaders, including people who are politically aligned with Donald Trump and are supporting him in the upcoming election, saying, actually, no, it is quite dangerous to spread disinformation because we don't know what despondent, reckless people might do if they feel that the federal government is not looking out for them. We have no idea what desperate lengths to which they'll go. Perhaps suicide, perhaps they won't reach out at all for assistance and try to, survive on their own, which would increase the likelihood of harm and death. There's no telling what might happen. There's a reason, though, that Republican officials on the ground are saying stop doing this because it has a material impact on search and rescue operations and recovery efforts. So clearly they believe it, number one. Number two, again, this idea that, well, sure, there are natural disaster funds. There's a natural disaster relief fund that is managed by FEMA, but there's also this entirely separate thing, which is also congressionally appropriated and congressionally funded that we don't like. Well, they are two different pots. And by the way, this is how congressional appropriations work. It is Congress, not the president, that is responsible for funding the federal government. Certainly, the president plays a role in terms of the budget process, but at the end of the day, the final decision is made by Congress. So when Congress gives funding for natural disaster relief and also for shelter services, they are two separate pots for two separate purposes, and you're not supposed to rob Peter to pay Paul. And President Biden didn't rob Peter to pay Paul. He is using the congressionally appropriated mandated natural disaster funds to provide natural disaster relief. That's what its purpose is. However, when Donald Trump was president of the United States in 2019, he actually did defy Congress and did rob Peter to pay Paul, but in the worst possible way. During hurricane season, he didn't take money from one bucket to increase natural disaster relief fund. He actually took money from the Natural Disaster Relief Fund in 2019 during hurricane season to send it to the southern border to build migrant detention camps. Donald Trump is objectively guilty of the very thing that he and Fox have accused Biden of doing, that Biden objectively didn't do. So it's lies and hypocrisy all in one. And Jeanine Pirro is trying to obfuscate, well, they're both funded by FEMA. Why isn't Biden doing this, that, and the other? Because that's not how congressional appropriations work. Donald Trump defied Congress, perhaps illegally, to do what he did. President Biden is doing the right thing, the congressionally appropriated thing, and it is up to Congress to increase those funds. And Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House, has refused to convene Congress in order to provide additional emergency authorization. This is a situation, I'm sorry, that is 100%, not 99.8, 100% the fault of Republicans. That's the problem with today's MAGA Republicans. They actually present us situations where there's no moral ambiguity, where they are almost always the bad guys, and the Democratic Party is almost always the good guys. And if you don't like it, if you're a centrist or conservative out there, get your party to get better. Get your party to be better. Make your politicians actually behave ethically and morally instead of just cynically in order to exploit disasters and gain cynical political points. That's what we're in right now. And that's why they're so triggered by Jessica Tarlov's fact checks. But she is undeterred, she is relentless, and she always wins. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.